Have you ever wondered how we can possibly know what life was like for people, say, 3,500 years ago on the Indian subcontinent? I mean, that's an almost unimaginable stretch of time. It feels totally lost, right? But what if I told you they left clues for us? Clues hidden in their most sacred words and in the silent stones they placed over their dead. Today we're going to be historical detectives. We're going to piece together this ancient puzzle. Let's get into it.
Seriously, think about it. How do you do that? It seems like an impossible task. We're talking about a time way, way before most history was ever written down. But you know what? Historians and archaeologists, they have some pretty incredible clues to work with. They've gotten really good at solving these kinds of puzzles.
And it really boils down to two main kinds of evidence. On the one hand, you've got the words they left behind, these ancient, sacred texts. And on the other hand, you have the physical objects, the stuff they left behind. And some of the most powerful clues come from how they buried their dead. Now, when you put these two things together, a surprisingly clear picture starts to take shape.
Okay, so let's start with the voices. Let's listen to what the past is telling us. Our number one source here is one of the oldest collections of literature anywhere in the world, the Vedas.
The oldest of these texts is the Rigveda, and it was put together around 3,500 years ago. Just let that sink in for a moment. This is a direct window into a world that existed 1,500 years before the Common Era. It's an absolutely incredible artifact of human thought.
So what exactly is the Rigveda? Well, it's not a history book or a novel. It's actually a collection of over 1,000 beautiful hymns and prayers. They're called suktas, which is a Sanskrit word that has this wonderful translation, well said.
These hymns, these well-said prayers, were composed to praise different gods and goddesses, and who they chose to praise tells us a ton about what was important to them. The three big ones were Agni, the god of fire, Indra, a powerful warrior god, and Soma, which was a special plant they used to make a sacred drink. So right away you see that ritual, conflict, and the natural world were at the very center of their lives.
But here's the part that just blows my mind. How did the Rigveda even survive? For more than 1,000 years, it wasn't written down at all. It was passed down from teacher to student, completely orally, memorized syllable for syllable with perfect accuracy. The first written copies don't show up for centuries, and it wasn't actually printed until about 200 years ago. That is just a staggering feat of human memory.
So what were they actually saying in these hymns? What did they ask the gods for? Well, their shopping list, if you will, tells us exactly what their society valued. They prayed for cattle and for horses. This was their measure of wealth. They prayed for sons to carry on the family name and legacy. And of course, they prayed for victory in battle, which were often fought over the most important resources: land, water, and yep, those valuable cattle.
So the hymns tell us what they prayed for. But does the physical evidence, the stuff they left in the ground, actually back that up? To find out, we need to switch gears. We're moving from their words to their actions by trying to read the silent stories told by the stones they used to honor their dead.
And these incredible burial sites are called megaliths. The name is pretty straightforward. It comes from Greek and just means big stone. And that's exactly what they are. These really elaborate graves marked by huge, carefully arranged stones. You can think of them as silent sentinels, watching over the dead for thousands of years.
Now, this practice of building these stone monuments really took off about 3,000 years ago. You see them all over, especially in the Deccan, in South India, the Northeast, and even in Kashmir. And what's so cool is that this means the megalith tradition was happening at the same time the later Vedic texts were being composed. So we have two parallel streams of evidence from the same time period.
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting. When archaeologists started excavating these tombs, they found something weird. A lot of these stone chambers, which are called cists, had this big, distinctive hole cut into one of the stone slabs. It looked like a doorway, which leads to a fantastic question. Why on earth would a tomb for the dead need an entrance?
And the answer is just so human. It tells us so much about their belief in family. You see, these weren't just single graves, they were family tombs, meant to be used again and again. That porthole was literally an entrance, so that when other family members died, sometimes years later, they could be brought inside and laid to rest with their relatives. It was a final home for an entire lineage, used across generations.
So now we have our two powerful sets of clues, right? We have the ideals and values from the Vedic hymns, and we have the real-world practices from these megalithic burials.
So what happens when we put them together? What kind of society starts to appear?
At one archaeological site called Brahmagiri, scientists found something that just laid it all out perfectly. In one grave, they found a skeleton buried with 33 gold beads and a really valuable conch shell. But in another grave, right nearby, the skeleton was buried with nothing but a few simple clay pots. I mean, this is undeniable physical proof of social differences.
It couldn't be clearer. The stuff you were buried with was a direct reflection of your status in life. This was definitely not an equal society. Some people were rich, powerful leaders, chiefs, and others were followers. Some were rich, others were poor. The stones, well, they don't lie.
And this clicks perfectly with what the Rigveda tells us about their leaders, who they called Rajas. Now, Rigvedic Raja was not a king like you might imagine. They didn't have big palaces or standing armies or a system for collecting regular taxes. And crucially, power wasn't automatically passed down from father to son. Instead, leaders were chosen for their skill and their bravery. They were more like powerful tribal chieftains than hereditary monarchs. And that fits perfectly with the evidence of status being based on an individual's wealth and power, not some royal bloodline.
So let's zoom in on one specific site where all these different threads just come together beautifully. At a place called Inamgaon, archaeologists are pretty sure they found the burial of exactly this kind of powerful chieftain.
The details here are just incredible. Okay, so this person was buried right in the courtyard of a huge 5-room house, by far the biggest in the whole settlement. That house even had a granary for storing extra grain, a clear sign of wealth. The body itself was placed inside a massive clay jar with the head pointing north, and they were buried with pots that probably held food and water for their journey into the afterlife. Every single sign points to this being a very important, very wealthy person, a village chief.
You know, this method of reading clues doesn't just tell us about who was in charge, it can even give us a peek into their scientific knowledge. Let's take a quick look at ancient medicine through the work of a famous physician named Charaka.
So about 2,000 years ago, Charaka wrote this really foundational text on medicine called the Charaka Samhita. And in it, he states that the human body has 360 bones. Now, if you paid attention in biology class, that number might sound a little off.
Modern anatomy, of course, counts 206 bones in an adult human. So what's going on here? Was Charaka just wrong? Well, not exactly. It's believed that he got to his number by being incredibly meticulous and including things like teeth, cartilage, and even individual joints in his count. It shows a different but still incredibly detailed way of looking at the human body.
So here's the real takeaway. Neither the ancient books alone, nor the ancient burials alone, could give us this much detail. It's only when we carefully combine them, the words people wrote in their hymns and the objects they buried with their dead, that we get this much richer, more complex, and more human picture of this world from so long ago.
And that, of course, leaves us with a final thought to chew on. 3,000 years from now, if a historian were to dig up our world, what clues would we have left behind? What would our microplastics and our servers full of data tell them about what we valued, what we believed in, and who we were? It's kind of a wild thing to think about.